Now, with the death of Nathaniel Julius at the hands of South African police, questions are being raised on whether colored lives matter. Some say the outrage from South Africans about George Floyd's death in the U.S. was more pronounced. Joining me now to talk about this is the leader of the Gatvol Capetonian Movement, Fadiel Adams. Fadiel, good evening and thank you for your time tonight. How is it that 26 years into our democracy, South Africa is still debating this question of colored identity?
It is a sad thing that 26 years first of all, let me start it by saying thank you for giving us the airtime. But it's a sad thing that 26 years into our democracy, we still haven't resolved the issue of the colored identity or the colored place in the the colored place in the nation. It is a sad thing that we still haven't addressed any of this. Where do we go from here? Look, it's clear that we can't look to government for answers. It is time that the colored people need to step forward and say, this is who we are and we're not going to apologize for it. That's where we are.
So the argument is you are reducing it to, of course, the question of just recognizing the ills that are facing a colored people as opposed to putting it together as ills that are facing society at large. And this seemed to reduce this debate then to what we are seeing now. And you're hearing from that previous voice note I played that, well, colored people have never identified black in this country because they were privileged during apartheid and so-called they chose that privilege because you were better than black. Others are saying, but it's also removing itself from the political debate of the othering of each other.
You know, I don't buy into the narrative that colored people were privileged under apartheid. Yes, we were a little bit better off, but it wasn't privilege. That is something that I have to refute. Remember that under apartheid, you know, with the Group Areas Act, colored people in the Western Cape in particular lived in all the prime areas. We were shoved into ghettos. We didn't get homelands. We didn't get our own police forces, our own budgets. That is what happened other places. Colored people are oppressed. Were oppressed, will be oppressed if we don't get this right. We are keen to take this issue as more than a colored issue. But then we need to be honest about it first. Why do we have this problem? Because of issues like black economic empowerment, which renders me as a colored man as not being black African in particular, and therefore unfit to work in certain sectors, as unfit for promotion in certain sectors, as unfit for housing in the only home that I have, which is the Western Cape. We need to be honest about this. We need to ask the hard questions. And if the answers are crude and cruel, the answers must be given and it must be accepted that a great wrong has been done to the colored people, that it has been done by our former comrades. We must not shy from it. That in the Western Cape where I live, white privilege is entrenched. And who pays for it? The colored people. That is the truth.
So, Fadiel, what I'm hearing you saying is that the mobilization of the colored community in politics, in corporate South Africa through policies like black economic empowerment, but also in politics itself within the leading party is the reason why we are seeing a rise of movements such as Colored Lives Matter.
Agreed. You see, in 26 years of democracy, with all the wrongs that have been perpetrated against the colored people in particular, only one politician has stood up and said, this is not fair, that this is not right, that this is not justifiable. We sit with 400 MPs every year, and only one has had the decency to say, no, this is not fair. You see, the Human Rights Commission itself says that since the dawn of democracy and with the advent of BEE and affirmative action, the colored community has gotten 40% poorer. That is exponential if you ask me. It has had a negative effect on us. It was supposed to uplift us. We are all in favor of black economic empowerment. It is a necessary thing, but it needs to be done fairly. Let me give you a little bit of an explanation into that. I can guarantee you that you can walk into any police station in the Western Cape and you will find that 80% of the staff are black African in particular. You can walk into any civic center in the Western Cape and you will find out that 80% of the staff are black African in particular. I can tell you that out of top level management, 50% staff will be white African in particular. There's no place for colored people here. While we are 50% of the province's population, we are expected to live off 10% of opportunities. This is a genocide against the colored people. We need to call it what it is. It is unfairness and it is a crime, and it is government-driven.
Should colored people be classified a racial group as opposed to just being given that name as a characterization of people of a mixed heritage?
I was under the impression that colored people had been classified as a racial group post-94, which at the time I felt was a crime. Remember that de Klerk was willing to scrap the colored term, that Madiba didn't want him to. And therein lies the rub.
Well, I'm saying that because colored people, Asian people, Indian people in South Africa, in a sense, are all looked at as black people, and therefore when we speak in terms of black economic empowerment, they are supposed to be beneficiaries thereof.
And that's the point, supposed to be. You know, it is a sad thing that in this country, a Chinese man is probably more eligible for a state tender than a colored South African. It is a sad thing, sir. The fact of the matter is that colored people need to embrace this identity. That government needs to embrace this identity, this culture, this language that they seem to hate so much. That it is ours, that we have no other language, that we have no other identity, that our history has been stolen. That is not our fault. That Adams is not my name, it is the name of a slave master. That is not my fault. At the moment, the feeling that I'm getting is that I'm not South African enough.
Now, there are those who are saying, well, in South Africa, we tend to reduce everything down to race too much. And in a sense, these movements, like a movement like Colored Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter for that matter, dismisses the noble cause of racial reconciliation. What's your take?
You know what? If I'm going to be honest, I agree. Because I was outraged at the death of George Floyd. I was outraged. It was a crime. Black lives matter. All lives matter. But the fact of the matter is 3,000 colored people died on the Cape Flats last year and nothing was said. There was no outrage. There was no government intervention. There was no, okay, let's look at the root problem and see how we can fix this. I'll tell you how you fix it. You scrap PE in its present form. You give our kids fair opportunities. You let them into varsities. You let them become something. The state says, no. Die by your thousands. Colored lives don't matter. I fully support this initiative. And anybody who calls us racist because of it needs to do a little bit of introspection.